Welcome to BigCountryPreps.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Countdown to Two-A-Days series, our daily look at an area football team and the key questions we're going to be answering about that team on our Saturday, August 14th preseason preview here at Big Country Preps. I'm with my partner, Dan Youngblood, and tonight, Dan, we are talking about one of the perennial powers in the area, the Wall Hawks.
Yeah, and the Warhawks have absolutely been one of the premier programs at the Class 3A level, and not only in this area but in this region. They've been a very, very good program under Coach Houston Guy. This year's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be hard to get a read on this Wall team for a little while. This is a team that returns only 12 lettermen from last year's team, 3 offensive starters, and 0 defensive starters. They're going to be completely rebuilding that defense this year. All new starters, so it's going to be. I think interesting to see kind of how that plays out. I think they've got some kids who got playing time, so I mean they're not without talent. And in the 12 lettermen they return are all kids who have been part of a successful program and have seen this program do some really nice things. But at the same time, they're being asked to step into roles that they haven't necessarily filled to this point. So the question is, when you're playing in a district with a defending state championship team like Jim Ned, can a team this young compete at that level? We'll find out. We'll find out when those two teams meet.
Couple of things. They do have a very good fullback in Dominic Garcia. They've got a capable quarterback in Gabe Haskins. They had a JV team last year that won 7 ball games. They've got 12 lettermen. They've got their system in place. They are good at what they do. They're still going to be good. Wall is still going to be a good football team. Young, but they're still going to be good. And I think behind Jim Ned in that district, I think that's going to be their spot. But they're going to grab a high playoff seed. This is going to be a good football team yet again.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one that will be a heck of a lot better at the end of the regular season than they are at the start of the regular season. Because you mentioned a couple of the skill players that I think it's important those guys return. The Dominic Garcia was a guy who rushed for almost 1,000 yards last season, really kind of jumped onto the scene as a junior. He's back. He's going to be a big part of their offense. Gabe Haskins, a guy who took over that quarterback position and did a fine job. He really ran that flex bone well. But they're going to be replacing an entire offensive line, and we know they lost some good ones, and Tate Williams included, a guy who's going to be playing at Baylor and going forward. So, this is a team that is going to have some young guys and some inexperienced guys in some very important positions. So I think it's going to be important for these guys to really get better as the season goes along. And I think in a lot of cases you're going to see some younger guys kind of jump in and take those roles. So it's just going to be a matter of how quickly they can learn things and kind of get up to that Wall standard. But I would expect by the time the playoffs roll around, by the time district rolls around, you're going to start seeing this team doing a lot of the things that Wall's done for a long time. But it is going to be a growth process.
Yes, it will be. One thing that is a very big positive, when you run the flex bone, your first option in the flex bone is your fullback. And that's the guy, that fullback dive is what you make everybody stop. And when you have a guy like Garcia as your first option, it's going to open things up on the perimeter for that offense. I still expect them to be able to score. They may struggle early on, especially against that difficult schedule, but this team will come along, and I think they're going to surprise you.
Yeah, and I think Haskins. I mean, he's a guy who can pull and run too. I mean, he's a guy that runs that option well. So you got 2 guys right there at the very beginning of every play that I feel like they're going to feel pretty confident in. I think the key is going to be finding some guys around those, not only that can open holes, but can also make some plays for them. But it's going to be fun. And you mentioned that schedule, and I think that's going to be
it's murder
to watch. Is that you when you're Wall, you play a tough schedule every year, but not every team. Yep. Is this young when you're starting and having to play that type of non-district schedule.
All right, let's take a look at that schedule for Wall. The non-district portion of the schedule typically is very difficult, but for a young team, it's extremely difficult. Now, Eastland is more or less, in my opinion, in rebuild mode. Some people think they're going to be better than what we think. So that remains to be seen. They still have a Cisco on the ledger. They've got an always tough Midland Christian private school team. It's very tough to beat. And we've seen vintage Wall teams get beat by that Midland Christian outfit. Vintage Wall teams that got beat by them. Then they're on the road at Mason. And then, of course, they've got a very difficult date with Shiner. That's going to be played in Fredericksburg on October the 1st. That's a pretty stout non-district portion before they get underway. And then, 2 games in, they've got Jim Ned in the district.
Yeah, crazy. But I think I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said, and it's not just Midland Christian. There are vintage Wall teams that have played some of these teams and struggled at times with when Mason's at its absolute best, or when and Shiner's obviously a great program. You're
Yes.
talking about teams that are hard for any small school team to line up and beat. And this is a Wall team that's going to be pretty inexperienced. They're going to have to learn on the fly. But it's going to be. I think it's going to be good for them. I think even if their record at the end of those 5 games doesn't look very pretty, those are going to be good games for them. Those are going to be important games for them, because once they get to district, outside of Jim Ned, I don't see any team in that district that they can't compete with or beat or really even go in there and probably be the favorite against. So if they can, hold things together through that tough non-district schedule, I think they've got a chance to go into the playoffs as a 2 seed if they play well. And at that point, you're feeling. I mean, you're going into the playoffs with on a run and with some momentum, and then you just kind of see where it takes you.
Their record going into that Jim Ned game could be 2-4. It could be 3-3. More than likely 2-4, and it's going to be a misleading 2-4 because of that schedule. I mean, if Wall were able to line up a row of cupcakes, they could go 4-1, whatever, 5-0. But they've got this murderous non-district schedule. So don't look at Wall's record going into that Jim Ned game and look at 2-4 or 3-3 and think, well, they're not very good. That's not going to be the case. By season's end, this is going to be a good football team.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head once again. Is I think that this is a schedule that will make a young team better. So whatever their record looks like at the end of non-district, and even through that Jim Ned game, this is a team capable of finishing the season on a 3-game winning streak with momentum and being a really tough out once they get to the postseason. So it's gonna be fun. I think this will be a challenge for Coach Houston Guy, who's it's going to challenge that program, which we all know has been built very well and is a reloading program, not a rebuilding program. But this is one of those. I think sometimes these are fun seasons for coaches, because you get to really see that growth. And I think a lot of times that's why you're in the profession, is to help kids get better and to grow. And this is going to be an opportunity to see that in action this year.
All right, game of the year for Wall. Let's take a look at that district schedule, and I'm going to pick a game of the year for them, and go ahead and let's hear yours.
I think I'm going to go with either the October 29th game at home against Clyde, or that regular season finale, November 5th at Early. I think depending on which of those teams ends up being the top challenger for that number 3 spot, I think that's going to be a big game for seeding. I think you want to finish either first or second in district, just given the fact that you're matched up with that really tough district 4-3 AD1. I don't think you want to fall to that number 3 or 4 spot. So I think that depending on which of those teams ends up being your chief competition for that number 2 spot, I think that's the biggest game of the year.
I'm going to take the Clyde game. If they're going to take that number 2 seed, they can't take the number 2 seed with a loss against Clyde in all likelihood. That's going to be one that they have to win, and then it sets up what should be an interesting season finale at Early. That game at Early could prove interesting. It's on the road. So, and Early gave them a go last year. Early gave Wall a tough time last year. So we shall see. But I think the most important game on that leisure is the Clyde game on October 20th.
And I think you make a really good point, because if you don't win that Clyde game, the Early game doesn't matter as much in terms of seeding. So I think you're right. I'd probably go with that Clyde game as well. That's going to be a big one.
All right, that's just about going to wrap it up for this episode of the Countdown to Two-A-Day series, the Wall Hawks. But we want to remind you that on Saturday, August the 14th, Big Country Preps will release its preseason preview, where we answer all the key questions about the Wall Hawks and every other team in the area. We're going to be more thorough and more accurate about Big Country football than any other media source. Nobody's going to beat us.
In the meantime, thank you for watching this episode of our Countdown to Two-A-Day series. And make sure you tune in again tomorrow when we'll be featuring the Brock Eagles here at BigCountryPreps.com.